Hello, everybody. Thanks for tuning in. I'm Jim Roger.
And I'm Peggy Kane.
And this is The Cutting Edge.
Revealing the truth.
Peggy, I think we're into a very interesting show tonight. Our guest was a former intelligence analyst, you might say a NATO insider, a man who really knew what was going on. And our guest tonight believes that the government has indeed been lying to the American people for almost 50 years now, approximately. And our guest tonight has been very outspoken about government secrecy and government lying. And our guest tonight is also featured on this videotape here, The Greatest Story Never Told. I recommend everybody watch this. Should be required watching material on everybody's UFO shelf. The Greatest Story Never Told. So, without any further ado, please allow me to welcome our guest tonight, Command Sergeant Major from the United States Army, retired with 27 years of service to our country, Robert O'Dean. Robert, thank you so much for appearing on the show tonight.
Jim, thank you. I'm honored.
And as a former serviceman, I'd like to thank you for your greater service than mine. I was just in there briefly, but you really did a lot for the country, Bob.
Well, I usually compile my service to the country with the additional 14 years with FEMA, which comes out to 41, and that's about as much time as anybody can possibly want to give to the government.
Yeah. And speaking about government or military, for that matter, you were an insider. You were stationed outside of Paris when you were in the Army. Could you?
I was at SHAPE headquarters from 1963 to 1967, and that was outside of Paris before old man de Gaulle threw us out. Yeah, I was there for some time, and I had a cosmic top-secret clearance.
Okay. And you became privy to certain documents relating to things our audience might be interested in. Is that correct?
Well, I had the pants shocked off of me, actually, literally. I arrived in '63. There was gossip going on at the time about a study that was underway, classified cosmic top-secret. And I was curious because it was supposed to be about UFOs. And I was suspicious about UFOs, but I was never convinced of their reality. But the study was underway. It had started in '61 when an incident occurred which almost triggered World War III. And they initiated the study to try to figure out what these objects were that were flying all over Europe. An incident on the morning of the 2nd of February in '61 almost triggered the war, because they came out of the Soviet sector, out of the Warsaw Pact area, flew over France, Germany, southern coast of England. These objects were very high, very fast, flying in formation, obviously under intelligent control. They generally would turn north over the southern coast of England, and then they would disappear off of NATO radar over the Norwegian Sea. But this one particular incident, I say, the Russians went on alert, we went on alert. We were just moments away from somebody pushing a red button. In 20 minutes, it was all over. What I was to learn later, at that time, the Deputy Supreme Allied Commander, a British Air Marshal by the name of Sir Thomas Pike, said, "We've had enough of this." And he initiated a study in '61. I arrived in '63. It was underway. They published it in '64 while I was there assigned to the Operations Division. And I got a chance to see it. An American bird colonel in the Air Force threw it on my desk in shock, which is a place we call the Supreme Headquarters Operations Center. We were on 8, 10, 12-hour shifts in there, round the clock. And one morning, about 2 in the morning, everybody's bored, nothing going on. As you may have heard, being in the military, it's 90% boredom and 10% pure terror.
Pure terror. Exactly.
Anyhow,
hurry up and wake too.
The coffee was too damn dark to drink. We'd all read every newspaper, and this Air Force colonel threw this on my desk, and he says, "Read this, Master Sergeant. It'll wake you up." And I went through this thing. It's about an inch thick, and I look back with kind of a bit of anger, because my life has never ever been the same since. Yeah. And I've often thought how maybe I could have avoided that. But once I saw and read and understood what was happening, I haven't been able to put it down, and for the next 40 years, I've been trying to make sense of what it means and what it's all about. And as I said, that was just the beginning for me. It opened up my mind, and for the next 40 years, I couldn't leave it alone. And after all this time, I've ended up learning things that there are times I wish I didn't know.
Yeah.
I'm serious.
I believe you.
There are things that I wish I didn't know.
Yep.
But, how can you not know and unknow things
That you already know.
that I learned that the issue is literally the greatest story in human history, if it's ever told, and it's not about to be told anytime soon. It involves our exposure and our interrelationship with several advanced extraterrestrial intelligences, which has apparently been going on for several thousand years. And as I was talking before we went on, I talked to Stephen Greer and many other people about this. Jim, for many years, I tried. I beat the drums,
I know you
and
did.
I raised hell, I rattled the cage and rocked the boat.
Yep.
It's a wonder I'm still around. Anyhow, I thought that for a time, I said, if we really push this and pique the curiosity of the average American, he's bound to say, hey, I got to know more.
Or at least you think they get mad as hell.
Well, once they found out what their government is doing to them, I thought, well, that would really piss them off, and we'll get hearings. Stephen Greer and I were trying together for a long time. I was a member of his organization for a long time. All we wanted, Jim, were some open hearings in Congress.
Yeah.
No closed doors. We knew that Congress could form a committee. They could grant waivers for violating your security oath. They had the subpoena power. And I said, I've spoken to congressmen and senators personally. I visited them. I visited my son, who was living in Arlington at the time.
Yep, and I know you've worked very hard, Bob.
He's a career naval officer, and he was in the Pentagon at the time. And I spent, I guess, 5 weeks visiting him, and I haunted the Hill. Went in and talked to members of the House, their staff, talked to about 4 senators. And I said, look, guys, I'm not trying to cause a stink. I'm not trying to embarrass you, but this is a great story. The American people have a right. They have a need. And I always got supportive response. Command Sergeant Major, we know. We're aware. Yes? Are you aware of how damn big this story is? Well, but we can't bring this up at the moment. There's an election year.
It's always an election
Well, every
year.
2 damn years somebody's being, And there was always an excuse of some kind. And I kept working, and I say, it's a simple thing. Form a committee, have a hearing, give us congressional immunity for violating our oath. I could fill this room with about 150, maybe 200, not only retired, all services, but guys on active duty, who will speak and tell you the honest truth. And what a naive poop I was. They didn't want the truth.
No.
The few who knew how big this story was must have said to themselves, get him out of here, because they're not about to bring this out. And then the more I learned, Jim, and I really dug, I was into everybody's files. I pushed my luck many times. It's a wonder if any of my old friends even would talk to me, because they'd see me coming. And
Steer away from you.
oh, God. And the more I pushed, and the harder I dug, the deeper I dug, the more I learned. And the more I learned, the more I became aware. And I must be honest with you and tell you that I've reached a point where I agree with the secret government. They can't bring it out. It's too damned big. With what's going on in our world, the truth of this reality would shake things up so much, so badly. And they've got enough on their plate right now. Of course, most of their problems on their plate are of their own making. But they've got enough on their plate right now with Iraq and Afghanistan and All these scoundrels doing the things that they're doing, they're not about to bring this out.
Bob, what do you think the shakiest part of this hidden truth is? Is it our origins, perhaps, where we...
Oh, well, that's one of the major issues, yeah. The evidence that has been collected.
Yeah.
And the evidence that is beyond doubt, no question about it, is that the human race is a hybrid. And Homo sapiens, as we exist here today, is a product of an incredibly advanced genetic manipulation that began probably 15, 20, 30,000 years ago. Yeah. And that in itself is dynamite. But then you get into the theological thing. You get into the creation of the world's religions. And you find out that every major religion on this planet was initiated and orchestrated by advanced extraterrestrial intelligence. Now, tell me, my boy, how do you tell that to an ultra-Orthodox Jew in Jerusalem? How do you tell that to an ultra-Orthodox Muslim in Mecca?
Swing a sword at you right away.
Let alone telling that to an ultra-Orthodox Baptist in the United States.
They'll throw a hammer at you,
And
swing a sword
listen,
at you, shoot you with a gun, string you up
I've
at
got family that are
Yeah.
Baptists. I mean, I'm not knocking the Baptists. Don't misunderstand me.
Yeah.
I'm not knocking these people. I'm just saying that their minds are kind of closed, that they're really not ready for this.
Yeah.
I was what do they call it, surfing the tube the other night. You know, that's a disaster in itself.
Yeah.
TV it's just a wasteland. I was surfing the tube, and when I come across some guy who's sitting there literally frothing at the mouth, and he's beating on this table and shaking his fist, and his eyes were glassy, and he was literally, you know, and I thought, that poor man needs help. And I stayed a minute because I was entranced. What in the world is this? And I find out it's a fundamentalist minister, and he's screaming bloody murder. Guess what? Dan Brown's book, The Da Vinci Code.
Yeah.
He's screaming over that. And my point, you see?
Absolutely.
Now, how do you tell these people that, let's just use an example, that the entire series of events in Galilee 2,000 years ago, from the birth, the life, the death, the resurrection, which did happen, you know, all of that involving the life of this young rabbi from Galilee, how do you tell the Christian world that that was all planned, orchestrated by an advanced intelligence? No, you don't do that right now, not unless you're ready to run like hell.
I agree. We are extremely more unstable than ever right now in this.
Well,
planet.
that's sad, because I had this deep belief that intelligence, reason, common sense, in time, would bring people together.
Hopefully.
You know, I never have been a deeply religious person in the sense of practicing a religion. I think of myself as a deeply spiritual person.
Yeah. Unlike you, I
And you know, first of all, I know about the reality of the human soul. That's a reality.
Absolutely.
No question about that. I know that we are immortal. I know that we reincarnate. Reincarnation is another reality that a lot of fundamentalists don't even touch. So I have no question about that. And I'm comfortable with the fact that I have a deep and abiding belief in God. I was accused once at a conference of being an atheist. And I had to stand up and say, no, I'm not an atheist. I know God exists. Oh, really? You know, and I said, no, I have no question about it. Well, who is God to you? Well, we personally met, you know.
Yeah.
God and me are on a first-name basis.
Yep.
But I tried to explain to them that God, in my understanding of God, is that there is a universal conscious intelligence.
Absolutely.
That permeates the universe.
Omnipresent, omni-aware. Yep.
This conscious intelligence is universal, spiritual in nature, and that every human being and every living creature on this planet is a part of that. And I tell people of the soul that makes them immortal is a spark of that divinity, of that universal conscious intelligence.
Yeah.
But that to me is God. Don't ask me to try to explain to you about an old man sitting in a big chair with a beard and all the rest of it.
And I take that one step further. I feel just the way you do about it. But I also feel that mankind does not need another human being to intercede for them, to talk to God for them. We all have the ability to approach ourselves on our own.
You put the preachers out of work, my boy.
Go
No, they don't. You know, they're not all for
Don't
that.
let anyone out there tell you
No.
that they have to intervene.
Hey, listen.
Yeah,
You don't need anyone to intervene between you and God.
that's right.
God is in you. And that lovely man from Galilee tried to explain that to them, you know?
Well, I think also that, though, the use of religions has been a service to a certain group who want to keep people fighting and on edge and separated. Because if we all come together and we really work together, we might actually figure out what's going on. But if we're kept bickering and fighting, there's an agenda there that has
Peggy, I blame the Anunnaki for that. I'm serious. I assume you guys are aware of the term.
Oh, yeah.
Sure.
Oh, yeah.
Meaning those who came down from above. Those are the guys who came down a long time ago, started intervening in our evolution, which is another dirty word, really, but they intervened in a big way. They genetically manipulated. They created Homo sapiens sapiens. And they made a point of keeping us separated. You hear the old legend of the Tower of Babel?
Absolutely.
That was not an accident. They did that on purpose. They knew that once they created this thinking creature, that if they left him alone, he was going to cause them trouble. Because we were from their genetic line. We were their bloodline. We were literally family. So they made a point of not only giving us, limitations, no long life. They limited us to what? A measly, puny 75 years or whatever? When we really should have had a right to a couple of thousand? No, they didn't want that because we were dangerous. But then they really had the biggest idea. They created these different religions, you see.
Oh, boy.
That'll keep them separate. That'll keep them fussing with each other. As long as they've got all these different religions, we don't have to worry.
That's when the baloney hit the fan.
The bratwurst hit the fan a long time ago.
Let me ask you a hypothetical question here, Bob. Let's say disclosure happened in one of two ways. And the first way being, say government came out with a big formal statement, all the governments of the world, and said, listen, this is the truth, da-da-da-da-da. Of course, most of the people are going to reject it that way versus a mass event around the planet from up above. What do you think the result would be either way?
Chaos.
Even with a massive...
Can you imagine what the stock market would do if an announcement like that was made?
Yeah, it would change things.
Look, I've used the analogy of Pandora's box. Most of you are familiar, I'm sure everybody's familiar with that legend. You open that box just a little bit.
It's too late.
That's all she wrote.
Yeah.
You just can't open it a little peep and take a look and then close it again. No. This is like Pandora's box because, Jim, once you make the announcement, the lid blows off.
Okay, let's say, for example, let's say there were massive sightings all around the world in one night simultaneously. The stock market's going to go to hell in a handbasket. But what about the people themselves personally? How would it affect humanity? Would it gel us that way even though the stock market goes down the tubes?
Listen, there are hundreds of thousands, probably millions of good folks out there that are basically stable. And statistics I've read indicate that 70% of the average American are convinced of the reality of extraterrestrial life. Most of them are convinced that they've already been here and maybe are still coming. Those people can handle this. That's not the crowd that I'm worried about. First of all, those folks could probably handle it, although there would be some disturbance. Because, as I said, once you tell that much of the story, they're going to want this, and then that. And the government can't announce this much, because then they would have to admit that they don't know that much. You know, can the government say, oh yeah, they've been coming and going for 10, 20,000 years? Oh yeah, they created Christianity, Judaism, Islam, they created them all. Whew. Talk about stock market.
Mm-hmm.
And I think also, we're just assuming, I mean, there are different ones. I'm sure they have different agendas.
Peggy,
And,
this report I read in '64, were convinced there were 4. They had learned 4 different groups.
Okay.
And they concluded basically that out of the 4, they had separate agendas.
Mm-hmm.
That there wasn't just one agenda among them.
Right.
Some of them, and now the latest I've heard, there's at least a dozen, if not more, coming and going, and that they all have separate agendas. Now, 1 or 2 of them apparently are, from what we've been able to learn, are connected with each other. They are affiliated with each other. Mm-hmm. That they perhaps are sharing an agenda. And those are the ones that I think basically are somewhat benevolent toward the human species. Mm-hmm. But some of the others have separate agendas, and some of them are not benevolent. Now, how's the government going to admit that? That there are guys out there with technology 100,000 years beyond our own that don't like us.
Or that want to use us.
Well, who are using us? How do you tell that?
Oh. And what about government collusion, government involvement?
Well, then you see, you've got another Pandora's box. You see, and there's no question, the evidence that we put together, and I've been collecting this for over 40 years, from sources that I trust, that we are in collusion with at least one.
Yeah. Bob, on your video here, you talked about a study. Can we get a shot on this? On your video here, you talked about a study called the assessment.
Yeah.
Right? And you talked about different species of beings. You mentioned metallurgical studies. So in order to have autopsies, and I guess all these things have been done, but in order to have a metallurgical study, you need material. So
well,
this runs a lot deeper than the surface, folks, this video here. Just want to let them know about it.
Well, you can get that through my wife's website, which is beyondzebra.com.
Beyondzebra.com.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. I just want the public to know that what we're covering here tonight, we're just scratching the surface. This video runs a lot deeper for everybody that's interested. But go ahead, I'm sorry.
Where were we?
Collusion.
No, well, you asked initially, I think, and I get on this thing, and I forgive me, I tend to ramble, but
that's good.
No, there's not going to be any formal government announcement. I was talking with Ed Mitchell one time. We were at a conference together, and he says, Bob, disclosure's happening every day. It's seeping, it's leaking, little bits are trickling out. He says, people like Gordon Cooper, come right out and said it. How many people really paid attention to Gordon? Mm-hmm. He went to the UN, he went to Congress. Mm-hmm. Oh, it was like it never happened. Gordon told them 30 years ago some of the things we're talking about tonight. Nobody paid any attention. So it's leaking out. You can't keep the lid on it. And I wish I could say that it's a well-planned and controlled leakage, but I can't.
I agree.
It's leaking out because there are guys in positions of authority who have clearances, who have been honest and come forward and told what they learned and what they've seen, and no one ever sent them to jail. People ask me, how the hell did you stay out of jail? Mm-hmm. And I think it was, like Bob Lazar, I opened my big mouth and got a little bit of a name, and I figured if they locked me up that would be the best evidence in the world that what I was saying was true. Mm-hmm. Now I'm interested about what this kid in England's going to have.
Oh, yes.
The one that,
fill everybody in on
tell
that
us about it.
Yeah.
Well, just a week ago today, the Guardian paper in London had a big spread on this. This British kid, this genius hacker, hacked into our Department of Defense and NASA, and man, had stuff he came up with indicating that we have a space command, and of course we know we have an aerospace command. It's got a 4-star general running it. But what most people have no idea is that we have a separate space program that is strictly military. NASA's a joke. Mm-hmm. In my opinion, forgive me, I'm not belittling all of the good and decent guys that work at NASA and all the astronauts that have died, for God's sake. But we have a separate program entirely. It's out of Vandenberg, and it's out of Groom Lake, and a couple of other places. There was about 5 or 6, maybe a half a dozen facilities in the country that are tied in with the Aerospace Command. And we launch shuttles out of Vandenberg. We have orbiting laboratories in space. We have militarized space. Remember when we signed the space treaty that no one is to militarize space? I don't know which lying president we had in office at the time.
And now it's Star Wars.
They all lie, but one of them signed it. Yes, we're going to sign the treaty. We had weapons in space the day they signed the treaty.
Yeah.
We have weapons that I don't know how bad they are, how powerful they are. I know we've got particle beam weapons, we've got lasers. We militarized space 20 years ago. And Vandenberg launches regularly. No big whoop-de-doo about it. No one ever pays any attention. No one ever goes there to try to photograph the launch. We got shuttles up there. We've got guys up there now in orbit that are not in the space station. They're in United States aerospace ships. And according to this kid in London, when he downgraded some of this, he got a hold of a set of orders that indicated where they were transferring some from this ship to that ship. And apparently we have big ships. Well, 15 years ago, Jim, I said we had evidence of ships out there that are over a mile long. And I even shared photographs of them in my slideshow.
Yes.
I remember
That Apollo 11, the guys who landed,
moon run,
the guys who landed took photographs on their way. They were watched. They were followed all the way to the moon. They were followed while they landed. They were watched while they were on the surface. They were followed all the way back. And some of these guys took, I don't know who it was. Collins was in the capsule that didn't land.
Yeah. Armstrong, was it Armstrong? No.
Armstrong and
who's just landed, actually walked on the moon.
yeah.
Collins stayed in.
I think Collins was still in orbit. He must have been one taking all these shots. We've got photographs of spaceships that are a mile long. Now, I often said and tried to say for a long time that those were those guys. Now I'm beginning to be convinced that some of them might have been our own. When you have a totally separate program that never sees the light of day, and then you've got all this hoop-de-doo on NASA, and Walter Cronkite's weeping on TV, oh, how terrible, oh, what wonderful it was. How do you tell the American people that, oh, that's nothing? We've got ships out there that have crews of 200 and 300.
Yeah.
How do you tell them that? Would they believe you? Probably not.
I've heard about these flying triangles. You remember the case with a lady in Texas was burned with radiation from one of these things, and her car got so hot she couldn't put her hand on. She burned her hand on the door handle of a car. Her hair fell out. She suffered radiation sickness, and there were a bunch of...
You're talking about the case in Texas?
Yes.
Oh, yeah. Well, that wasn't
Yeah,
a
that was
triangle. Yeah.
Wasn't it a triangle?
No, that was a giant beer can or something.
Okay. But anyways, it
That's a
resulted in those...
Cash Landrum case.
Yeah.
Yeah. Betty Cash was the one who ended up dying. And Vicki Landrum died also.
They're both gone now.
Yeah, well, that was one of our experiments that didn't work too good. They were using atomic piles to power that thing.
Yeah.
And they generated enough radiation.
I've been told, I was at one lecture where a fellow said that these things have a JATO assist to get them up. Once they're up beyond the heavy part of our atmosphere, they're okay. They can stay up for months at a time. But once they get down into the heavy atmosphere, they need other assistance.
Well, they've solved that problem.
Yeah.
Right now, they take right off just outside of the hangar. You don't want to know where
I'm all ears.
Palmdale.
Farmdale.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Lockheed Martin.
Yeah.
Lockheed Martin has been building those.
Yeah.
I didn't get a chance with Art a couple of weeks back when I was on his show.
That was a wonderful interview, by the way.
I wanted to tell him that what he and his wife had seen that night, that he jabbers about from time to time, was probably one of our own.
TR3B?
Well, no. Much better than the TR3B.
Okay.
No. These things are silent. They probably weigh 50,000 tons. Doesn't matter.
Yeah,
When you've got a system
Yeah.
that nullifies gravity, you could build an object as big and heavy as an aircraft carrier. It doesn't matter, because once that system is plugged in and generated, you nullify gravity, the whole damn thing. And for your people who might be listening or viewing,
Sure.
anybody in the audience,
We have an educated audience, I
you
believe.
probably do, yeah. Anyhow, there's a book, Nick Cook. You familiar with
Yes.
the name?
Yep.
Nick used to work for Jane's,
Mm-hmm.
Aviation Weekly,
Yep.
until he wrote his book, The Search for Zero Point, and he got fired. Now he's got a second book coming out. Well, read Nick's The Search for Zero Point, and you put pieces together like I was trained to do in the military. You put all these little pieces together, and then you end up with a picture. Well, Nick laid it out pretty clear. We have had apparently anti-grav and zero-point energy now for years.
Yeah.
And I'm surprised that not only was he fired, it's amazing he's still walking around. Because he's a brilliant young journalist. And working for Jane's, you have to be pretty sharp. Because probably it's the best organization of its kind in the world.
Mm-hmm.
They had Jane's Naval and then Jane's Aviation.
Yep.
Well, Nick put it all together in that book, and we started picking up the pieces of how to do it from the Germans in 1945. That's how far back this goes. Because they literally were right on the cusp of having it themselves. That war ended just in time, or we would all be speaking German. I kid you not.
Ich spreche ein kleines bisschen.
Oh, yes. Because they were, the Germans have always been geniuses at engineering, and they were that close.
Yeah.
And
Now they invented the jet engine during World War II. They invented and perfected the jet engine
yes, they did.
in World War II.
And they were just that close to getting the atomic bomb.
We love their scientists, don't we?
We brought as many over here as we could.
Paperclip?
We were fighting the Soviets. No, he's mine. No, he's mine. We got about 4/5, and the Soviets got the rest.
I think we got the cream of the crop.
Well, we got von Braun, who
Yeah.
was
God
a
bless him.
damn genius.
He's gone.
And I in my presentations, it's why I don't do it anymore, I quote von Braun.
Mm-hmm.
I have this quote. It was published in a newspaper and several magazines. 30 years ago, von Braun said, "We are in communication with intelligences far beyond what we originally thought. We are going to continue to develop this relationship, but more I cannot say at this time."
Yeah.
Now, this was von Braun, publicly speaking, 30 years ago. Well, I don't know how long he's been dead now. But the point is, how many people picked up on that?
Yeah.
Well, I think that there's been a real good concerted effort to keep the American people dumbed down, distracted. The TV in the corner of every living room and every bedroom keeps people in a state of a stupor. I really think that it's almost beyond hope at this point. There are a few people who really want to know, but the average person is too distracted and...
Peggy, there are damn good folks out there. There are good people out there. I'm born and raised in this country. I love this country, and I love, I'm a Midwesterner. I was raised in beans and beef and potatoes. I'm not a fancy pants. My years in France didn't change my views on things. But there are a vast number of Americans out there that are asleep.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
And
scary.
they're in a numbed down kind of state that if it doesn't involve bouncing a ball or kicking a ball or swatting a ball or driving some souped up car around a track, what do they call that thing?
Maserati or something like
No,
that?
no, no, no. There's a term
Or
for it.
Formula,
Well,
Indy 500 or
yeah.
Marcia, help me. What is it I'm talking about?
NASCAR.
NASCAR.
oh yeah.
You can tell we're really
I mean,
involved in
good
that.
God, you know, a critic said one time, why would anybody want to watch a traffic jam, you know? You drive fast and turn left. This is NASCAR. Now, there are millions of good folks out there that don't leave their TV set when the NASCAR races are on.
Yeah.
And then you end up with the basketball finals and the
Yeah.
football and the tennis and the golf. Yeah, they're
And
dumbed
American
down.
Idol,
Keep them,
and-
well,
and
you know.
on and on.
You talk about, what was the German master of propaganda? Goebbels? Goebbels, yeah.
Yeah.
He learned from the Romans. And the Romans learned very early back, keep them entertained, you know. Keep them fed, keep them entertained with games, you know,
Yeah.
and that's all you have to worry about. And we can do whatever we want. And they did. And they conquered the world, for God's sake.
You know, one of my pet peeves, you said the key word, the games. It seems that we have two generations now. We're on a second generation of young people that feed continuously around the clock on either sex or violence. These video games, they sit there drooling at the mouth, watching the screen, blood splashing up all over the screen. They do this stuff 24 hours, not 24 hours a day, probably 5, 6, even 10 hours a day, some of these kids, 7 days
One
a
of
week.
these impressionistic kids goes out, grabs a gun, and blows a few people away, and
Yeah.
they said, what happened?
Yeah. But
He
we're
was such a good boy. you
Yeah,
know?
we're a society that feeds on violence. This is our entertainment. Something's
Well-
sick. Something's wrong. If this is our
Jim,
entertainment.
that's not an accident.
Yeah.
That's orchestrated.
Yeah. Oh, I don't doubt that.
That's not just something that has been just happened. It's an orchestrated plan to keep them entertained, keep their attention over here while we're over here doing this.
Yeah.
And while we're over here, we're launching, you know, shuttles out of Vandenberg, and we've got spaceships in orbit with crews, and we've got anti-gravity, and we have zero-point energy. And who knows? Well, there is an entire world out there who knows. On Art Bell, I mentioned a name. I said, you know, one of the guys that really is on the inside of the cover-up, has been for years. One of the guys that's one of those aerospace geniuses, ex-National Security Agency, Bobby Ray Inman.
Yes, I heard you.
And Bobby
about
Ray
that.
is up to here in this whole thing. And what Eisenhower predicted is not only real, but it's in control. The, what do they call it? The military-industrial complex.
Yes. That's what Eisenhower.
Yeah, and I tried to tell him because he realized when he first tried to get the answers to some things that these guys already were in charge. They were in control. They had already communicated with this one group who has helped develop anti-grav, who has helped us develop 0 point. And Bobby Ray is up to here. I said he's probably one of the prime members of the so-called Majestic 12. They don't call themselves that anymore, but
Their name, but they're still alive.
there
and
aren't
well.
12 of them anymore. There are about 40 of them or 50 of them. But they exist, and they're well happy and fat, and they're stealing $3 trillion of our money.
Well, how does this tie in with the top families on the planet, the Illuminati, all these different groups that, you know, it seems that they really are the power, you know, there's a pyramid of power, you know, and then you
Peggy,
have...
we live in an oligarchy.
Yeah.
We don't have a democracy.
No, I know.
Our republic started dying on Christmas Eve in 1913, when that bunch of scoundrels in Congress passed that law at midnight on Christmas Eve, 1913. Figure that out. Who's in the House? Who's sitting there? They had a quorum. They passed a law. What do we call it? The financial thing.
Federal Reserve.
Federal Reserve.
Yeah.
That's when you could start kissing your government goodbye. You could kiss your republic goodbye.
Yeah.
And then 1947, they passed the National Security Act. That same year, we created what we called the Yakuza Pact. Now there are people who don't even know what the hell that is. And it's been common knowledge to anybody who bothered to even look. UK, USA. We signed that pact in 1947. United Kingdom, the United States, Australia, Canada, New Zealand. We're all in the same bathtub together. We're all sharing the same secret. They all put together a program called Echelon, which literally dominates the communication of the planet, not only from telephone and telegraph and computers. Echelon dominates the communications of the planet. No conversation can be held electronically in the world without Echelon eavesdropping.
Yeah, and that's the program where, folks, if you say certain things on your cell phone or home phone, it triggers a recorder, records your conversation, sends it into higher levels of government, and
you get a visit from somebody.
You might be placed on a no-fly list too.
Oh, Mr. Dean, we just heard you, talk to us a few moments. I will if you get rid of those guns. Oh God, you've done your homework. Echelon, Yakuza, it's all going back years and years. This didn't happen last week.
No. This has been going on for a long time.
But how can you tell the average American, not only do we have aliens in our midst, I mean literally in our midst. They're walking up and down the street. There could be one sitting here in this audience.
There probably are a few here.
There's a couple who look rather suspicious. There's one right back there that looks kind of suspicious.
Let's take a vote.
Anyhow, that was a conclusion of the SHAPE study, the assessment in 1964.
Yeah.
That out of the 4 groups they knew of then, all 4 were humanoid, but one was just like us. Human. Well, those are our cousins. Those are the guys who literally created us. They're probably the modern Anunnaki.
Where do you think they are from, Bob?
Well, I have a strong belief that Nibiru exists.
Yeah.
Before he died, unexpectedly from a coronary, never had a heart problem in his life. The chief astronomer of the Naval Observatory, a fellow by the name of Robert Harrington, told Sitchin one time, and Sitchin got it on tape.
Yeah.
He says, we've discovered this planet a long time ago. He says, we know it exists. We have the mathematical evidence. We've computed it all. There's no question it exists. He says, the only thing we need to do is name it. And Sitchin says, it's already been named. The Sumerians named it, for God's sake, 8,000 years ago. Nibiru. Yeah. And it's real.
May I say something in support of that? The Catholic Church, or the Vatican rather, more specifically, built a telescope on Mount Graham in southern Arizona here, and the telescope is ran by a Jesuit priest from Spain. They're all degreed astronomers, and a very close friend of mine speaks Spanish, goes to the same church where some of them attend on Sunday. And he asked one of them, he says, what are you doing up there with that telescope? And the only thing he just turned and he looked at him, and the only thing he said to us was, we're looking for something.
We're looking for something.
That was his answer.
Well, they know it is out there. They just don't know exactly what its orbit, they don't know when it's due to come back.
$33 million, if I understand.
Listen, did you ever, there's common knowledge there of how that scandal took place. Now, here's a mountain in an Indian reservation that not only is declared
sacred ground,
sacred ground for the tribe, but it also is a sacred place for wildlife. The conservation had delegated that whole area as no touch, no development, because we've got several things here that on the edge, wildlife, owls, whatever.
Squirrels.
Well,
red squirrels.
In spite of the fact that the Indians screamed bloody murder, in spite of the fact that the conservationists screamed bloody murder, whoop-de-doo, that thing went through like nothing. The government got in it. The Vatican paid the bill. They built the telescope, and they're sitting up there looking for something. What?
Yeah. I was very close to that telescope during construction, and even the road signs up there to the telescope are written in Astrofe, observatory in Italian. They're written in Italian, the signs. So,
No,
I've
big
also-
bucks out of Rome paid for that.
yeah.
I've heard the rumor that most of the telescopes now, the major ones that are facing south or in that direction from which it seems that Nibiru is coming, you cannot.
It'll come out of the southern hemisphere, yeah.
They're not going to be able to, nobody can get onto those right now.
Well, listen, Robert Harrington was trying to develop and enhance an existing observatory in Chile. And he had sent, you know, several hundreds of millions, maybe dollars of U.S. money, to upgrade this telescope in Chile, which is down in the southern hemisphere. And he died. Boom. Poor guy had a coronary. Next thing you know, funds withdrawn. We refused to get involved with the Chilean telescope because we didn't want that, you know, we don't want anybody pointing out that, hey, we found it first. It's coming, yeah.
It's coming, it's
The
coming.
question, people have asked me, and I play with this because I'm a student of history. It made its last pass around 1600 BC. And according to the Sumerians, it has an orbit of 3,600 years. You know, I can take off my shoes and we can count by my... Doesn't take a real expert to figure out 1600 BC.
And we're within the last century.
And
Yep.
2000 AD, hey, you know, 3,600 years, that mother is due. Well, you bet it's due. And yeah, they're not going to say a word about it officially until it's in the sky. And people will out at night say, well, what the hell is
What's that?
And then it's going to be too late. You know, the big reason why the secret is so tightly kept is that every time Nibiru makes its pass, depending on which side of the sun we are and they are when it makes its pass, all hell can break loose down here.
Yep.
Yeah.
It's a
If
matter
it
of
and we
survival.
are on the opposite side, it could be awkward. There could, you know, we'll know it, but it's not that bad. But if it and we are on the same side at the same time,
Oh, man.
look out. And that's why the government is so antsy about it, because I don't know whether the Jesuits on Mount Graham have figured it out yet, but they don't know just where it's going to come.
Yep.
And it'll probably be visible within 10 years. And then they'll know which side, and then we're going to hit.
You know, there's some other interesting dynamics along with that. Is, for example, this Monsignor Velducci.
Yeah.
He, I guess he spoke recently here at a conference, and he really ticked a lot of people off because, and I was reading in UFO magazine that he indicated, you know, we're the bottom of the barrel, folks. Anything else out there that's alive is far more intelligent than we are, and he kind of got everybody ticked off. But anyways, he does agree that they're out there, and it's something that we should be dealing with. That he's one of the few religionists, I think, that...
Well, His Holiness
Yeah.
announced before he died, so
Yeah.
to speak, you know. That name troubles me. You know, anybody's... It's like the Dalai Lama, His Holiness. I have trouble calling anybody His Holiness. But he said before he died, he
I
says,
agree.
oh yeah, he said, they're children of God, as every life in the universe is.
And they are.
Look, when I was a kid, my grandma used to thump on me and say, if you could only see yourself as others see you. And as I got older, I kept hearing that again and again. My grandma was a great lady. If we could only see ourselves as others see us. And I've taken that and applied it to the human race and that bunch. If we could only see ourselves as they see us. Now you look at a society or societies that could be literally not only 100,000 years, but 1,000,000 years ahead of us, not only in technology, psychology, sociology, spiritual. You're looking at advanced intelligence so far beyond us. And then you look around us, and you read the paper, and you watch TV, and it is damned depressing.
Yes, it is.
And as I mentioned to you earlier, as I stopped traveling, I don't go to airports anymore. I refuse to be patted down and have my shoes and belt removed. I've been doing some remote viewing, and I said that is the only way to travel.
Yep.
Well, how's that going, Bob?
Well, inasmuch as it's a personal, private, venture of my own, I don't do it for the government, so I don't have to worry about funding and such. But for anyone who is interested in it, and I will share this with anybody who wants to know, every human being can do it.
Mm-hmm.
And I suspect every human being does it and doesn't realize they're doing it. But your spiritual nature, your soul, that entity within you is infinite, and it can travel the universe. There's no such thing as distance. There's no such thing as time. There's no such thing as yesterday, tomorrow.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And when you get into that realm,
Mm-hmm.
that's dynamite.
Yeah, we've been there. Peggy's an avid
And well,
reviewer,
when you
also-
touch with them, and I've done a bit of that, and I wanted to say that any of you who want to try that, if you haven't tried it, you start remote viewing the aliens. They know that you're there because they sense the presence of that soul of yours, your consciousness.
Yep.
It's like, who was it? One of the earlier remote viewers years ago discovered the 4 major alien bases on the planet.
Ingo Swann?
Or
Ingo
McGonagall?
Swann?
No, before Engo. The one that,
Put off?
Price.
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 Yeah. Price remote viewed 4 major alien facilities on the planet and located them and pinpointed them. Told the government exactly where they were, but he says, when you go in there, they know you're there, and they have a way of shutting you down.
Yeah.
So you really can't wander around and look because they know you're there, and, well, I've run into that. And when you start nosing around into their business,
Mm-hmm.
They have a way of
Mm-hmm.
throwing you back into your own reality, so to speak, and it's over.
Let me just tell you a quick little 15, 20-second story. When I learned remote viewing, I really didn't understand too much about myself, who and what I am. The first, I attended the same school that Peggy did, but the first day I was on the way home driving in the car, and I punched through that veil. I learned how to use what I was born with, to use naturally, and the tears just ran down my cheeks. I just cried. For the first time, I was so happy that I really understood who and what I am, primarily a spiritual being, and it was a breakthrough. It was wonderful.
That's why I fault most organized religions, is that they're missing that point.
Yep.
They don't seem to grasp. And the carpenter from Galilee, God, he was a hell of a lot more than any of them imagined.
Yeah.
He tried to explain that, you see, that once you grasp that the kingdom of heaven, as he tried to tell them, is within you. Mm-hmm. It's that soul, that divinity, that spark that's part of God. That's all there is. That's all you need to know. There's no more fear. There's no more anger. There's no more greed and avarice. All of the things that the average human being out there is busting his ass over is unimportant. And I was sharing this with Marcia, my wife, the other day, about that I have kind of sort of gotten off the track. I'm no longer in the race. I have abdicated from the human race. I'm not running on that track anymore.
Go ahead, knock yourself out.
I've stepped off to the side. I'm watching the rest of them go by, and they're hunting, grunting, and gasping, and wheezing, and, bye, guys, I'm not doing that anymore.
The human race.
I think I'm 76, for God's sake. I figured I should have learned a lesson once or two along the way. It's been slow. I haven't been God's greatest, no genius. It's taken me a long time. I'm a slow learner.
Bob, we'll argue with that.
But finally, I have been to grasp where I am.
Yeah.
I found the same point.
Yep.
Jim, I don't have any more fear.
Yeah.
I have no more aggravation.
Yeah.
Now, Marcia will laugh. She'll say, I'm aggravated every time I read the New York Times.
And
I'm grumbling and what? Look, stupid.
this is what people are struggling for with all their folk. They think they can achieve this through wealth. It
No.
can't be achieved that way. This is a priceless gift.
No. Well, if we're getting close to the end, I want to just say one thing. One of the things that I have been aggravated the most by is that when I have begun to grasp what's out there,
Yep.
and I'm not talking about just one planet, another star system, another galaxy, the multiple dimensions where a lot of our visitors are from, when you realize the infinite universe and the incredible things that are out there and available to us, and here we are living in this stinking, smelly jungle, pummeling the hell out of each other,
Yep.
down here like a bunch of savages. I think, I don't know whether I said this to Bell or not, but the comparison between us and New Guinea savages that are eating each other, beating their drums, having their little territorial wars, between us and them, consider between us and them. And that breaks my heart, because I wanted to be a part of that. And I wanted my race to be a part of that.
Less than 30 seconds. You know, in an interview, the late Dr. John Mack, with him, he told us, he'd interviewed over 2,500 different abductees, and the one message that filters through from the visitors is that they just can't understand a species that kills their own species within their own species.
Yeah.
Thank you.